reality is most people in our country today have some sort of anxiety. You know, last week when I said about who's struggling with a little bit of anxiety, the amount of hands that went up in the building was incredible. I'm talking to more and more people now that are suffering with anxiety. So today's message, I want to encourage you to listen in. If you're feeling anxious, listen in, because this might be a message that you need to hear today. If you're not feeling anxious, if you think everything's absolutely perfect and you're happy, listen in today, because you're going to have someone close to you who's feeling anxious. Is that okay? We know that just because the reality of anxiety in the country at the moment. But as we come out of lockdown, whether it's the end of next week, whether it's in a month's time, or some newspapers are saying next spring, reality is, it's a little bit exciting. Just think of the fact that we don't have to social distance anymore, or hopefully in future. Doesn't that sound good? We're not worried about having that 2-meter circle around us. You know, I've been carrying an umbrella everywhere, even when it wasn't raining, because you can use an umbrella like a tool, can't you? As if, stay away from me. Okay, we don't have to do that anymore, hopefully soon. Face masks. Is anyone looking forward to the day we get to burn these and throw them away? That panic. You know when you go into the shop and you've forgotten your face mask and you're like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Then you look in your back cupboard and you try and tie like a jumper around your face. Or you try and find something. I've had parents in school like this, trying to go in, like walk in like this, because they're having to cover their face. Getting rid of face masks is going to be so good. Just being able to go somewhere without having to book 5 months in advance. Doesn't that sound good? Going to a restaurant, or for us, like our family, Naomi's visiting, my wife's a teacher, and because we always have to go out on school holidays or weekends, there's been so many times we thought, oh, the weather looks great, let's go to this place. Can't, fully booked. And it just feels like the idea of being able to go somewhere is so exciting. But in the same time, in the midst of the excitement, it's also quite scary for some people the next few months. There are people who are worried about their jobs. There have been people who have been put on furlough, and their furlough's coming to an end, and they're worried that they're going to be made redundant. You've got other people who've just about got through in the last few months, but they've got themselves into so much debt, surviving and getting through, and the anxiety that's hitting them because they know that they've got to face this debt in the coming months. You've got other people who are just technophobes, and you don't know how to use a mobile phone, let alone an old-fashioned mobile phone, let alone a smartphone. And you're thinking, how am I going to adapt to this new world where everything seems to be based on my phone? Those of you who are a little bit have social anxiety right now, you know when you meet somebody, do you bump your fist like this? Do you fist pump? And soon, do you hug them? It's a question, isn't it? You're going to have a sign saying, don't hug me. Okay, on it. What do you do? How do you greet them? What do you say? All these questions come. Some people have been so stuck in seclusion that they're thinking, how do I have a conversation with somebody? And this anxiety is building up in so many folk. And the thing I'm finding as a pastor is a lot of people are sharing this stuff with me. I'm noticing it around the place. And everyone seems to think that it's just them. It's nobody else. They're the only ones that are feeling this way. And it seems to be across the board. In the last few months, I've had a lot of men who've come and spoke to me. Really successful men, tough men, men who've been through a lot, men who are strong. And they're saying to me, Jim, I'm really struggling. And some of the guys are even saying to me, Jim, I haven't told a single person that I'm struggling. I haven't even told my wife. And this seems to be happening over the place. But I believe that the Bible has some guidance for us about how we can overcome anxiety, how we can work our way through it. And I want to encourage you that there's people around you who want to support and encourage you too. So let's just start off nicely here. What is anxiety? Well, the dictionary definition of anxiety is a feeling of nervousness or unease about something with an uncertain outcome. You know that feeling when you can't control things? Do anyone know that feeling? When things feel out of control and you want to do stuff but you can't do it. And you know, and you try everything you can do to control, but things are just out of your hands. Maybe your debts are out of your hands, or whatever you do, you can't get your debt under control. It may be your family situation. You may have a family member who's out of control and you can't do anything. It may be that you've got an immigration case and things you can't control. And maybe you're waiting for a house and you can't control the things. It may just be a medical issue that's going in your body and you can't control everything. And you feel nervous. And that nervousness goes to anxiety. And the first thing that you think about in the morning is that problem. The thing you think about in the middle of the night is that problem. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Some of you do, don't you? This is real stuff. And as Christians, our answer to a lot of these questions is just, I'll pray for you. I had someone the other day turn around and say to me, it's all right, Pastor, going to pray for me, but what difference has prayer made so far? And when you're in a really bad place, even praying is really, really hard. It's challenging. As Christians, when we look at the Bible, it tells us to trust God over and over and over again. But when we're feeling really depressed, when we're feeling really anxious, when the weight of our situations is affecting us, trusting God is really hard, isn't it? It's challenging. Now, Jesus says these incredible words in John 14, verse 27. He says this, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give it to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid." What a verse. I love that verse. Don't let your hearts be troubled. But the problem is when I'm scared, when I'm anxious, my heart is troubled. I don't experience God's peace. I feel anxious. And the problem is, when I'm anxious, I tell myself a different story from what Jesus is trying to tell me. Steve Cuss, an Australian pastor based in America, says this. I love this quote. He says, when we are under pressure, exhausted, or feeling threatened, we revert to depending on the stories we tell ourselves rather than the story of God. When we're feeling anxious, when we're feeling stressed, when God says he won't abandon us, we tell ourselves that God has forgotten us. When we're feeling anxious, when God says, I've got a plan for you, you say, there's no hope. When we're feeling anxious, when God says, don't worry, we choose worry. When God says we are loved, we say that we're unlovable. But the thing I'm learning is this, is that when I'm anxious, the thing that I need to know most of all is God's story over my situation and the fact that God loves me. Can we say together, God loves me? You know, we can't sing in church, but we can talk to each other. Do you want to look at the person across the way from you or turn around to someone and say, God loves you? There we go. God loves you. You know what the thing about this is, he may not do, the thing about God's love, as I'm learning this now, is that God loves me. He doesn't do things the way I want. Sometimes we say, where is God? Because he doesn't do things the way that we want. But when someone loves us, they want the best for us. Real love is not mushy. I remind my wife of that now. Okay, real love is strong, it's steady, it's faithful, it's loyal, and it seeks the best for those that they love. In 1 John 4 verse 18, it says these words. It says, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear because it has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made perfect in love. Now, when this verse was given, it was given to a group of Christians who were terrified, who thought that they weren't going to get to heaven. And John was saying, don't be worried because God loves you. You're getting there. Don't be scared. But I think the sentiments we can take for this are for general anxiety. When we know the love of God, it drives out fear. When we know that we're loved, it drives out fear. Theologian Howard Marshall writes this about the verse. He says this: love and fear are incompatible. Can we say that together? Love and fear are incompatible. Do you know my daughter, sometimes she gets a bit lonely at night and gets a bit scared at night. And some of the time, the only thing that calms her down is by me lying on her bed. I face the opposite way. She gets my smelly feet in her face. And just by me lying there, it calms her. If you're a parent, you'll understand this. You'll have seen this. And she just goes off to sleep because she knows I'm there. And I believe for us to truly experience the peace that Jesus gives, it's not just about us saying, I've got to get rid of my fears. Instead, it's about us truly experiencing God's love. You know, when we get overwhelmed, under pressure, exhausted, and feeling threatened, instead of telling ourselves that everything will fall apart, we need to remind ourselves that God is there. Do you know what? My wife, she'll know this is true, so I'm not exaggerating. You know, there's some people in life, when the problems hit, they're like, oh, everything's okay, it'll be fine. You know those people? I want to slap them, okay, because I'm jealous. For me, my wife said to me the other day, she said something to me, she said, Jim, what's the worst that can happen? Whew! You should never ask me what's the worst that's going to happen, okay? Because I'll tell you what, I will tell you the worst that's going to happen. When I describe the worst that's going to happen, I describe the apocalypse, okay, in the end. It's going to be really bad. And she goes, well, you're a barrel of laughs, aren't you? Great. And sometimes, though, we can go through this. We can concentrate on the worst that can happen. We can tell ourselves the worst. But sometimes, actually often, when we are scared about the future, when we are scared about what we are facing, we need to remind ourselves what God thinks, not what we think. Is that okay? Remind yourself of what God thinks, not what you think. You know, whatever happens in your life, even if you make a bad decision, God still loves you. God still loves you. Right, I'm coming into land now, so you don't have to worry. The good thing about these COVID services is that I don't preach as long, so you guys can breathe easy. I want to take a quick look at Joshua chapter 1. Okay, we're not going to have time to read it all now, so I want to encourage you when you get home to read Joshua 1. If you're watching this on the video, pause the video now, read Joshua chapter 1. And this Joshua chapter 1, the setting for the passage is this. Moses has just died. Joshua has become the leader of the Israelites. Now the Israelites had just come out of Egypt. They traveled around the desert. Joshua was one of those guys who lived in the in-between times, okay? He spent most of his life in the desert, in the in-between. And now he was going to lead the people of Israel into their new land, into a new world. And Joshua, we have this impression of him being a strong leader. He went in, he drove the Canaanites out. He led the great armies of Israel. He did incredible things. But can I let you into a little secret? Joshua was scared. Now the Bible doesn't tell us Joshua was scared. But in Joshua chapter 1, God says this, be strong and courageous. Then God says a bit later on, be strong and courageous. And God says again, be strong and courageous and do not be afraid. Does that sound like God's talking to someone who's not scared? That's God talking to someone who is fearful, who is a bit worried. And that's why I believe God said those words over and over again. But the word for be strong is this. The Hebrew is chazak. Now chazak means this. It means to grow, to be or to grow firm or strong, to strengthen, to bind on or about, to gird on. Erwin McManus, a pastor in America, he says this, the Hebrew word here, his definition of it is to fasten onto something. When Joshua was scared, God didn't say to him, just don't be scared. God said to him, Joshua, stick onto me. Bind yourself onto me. Be strengthened by me. Guys, it's not about us being strong. It's not about us making ourselves brave enough. It's not about us trying to defeat anxiety. It's about us sticking to God when we are scared, when we feel helpless, when we feel anxious. Maybe God is saying to you this: stick close to me. With your financial problems, stick close to me. Be sensible, but don't panic. Stick with me. With your family issues, God is saying, don't be anxious. Stick close to me. With your asylum problems, or searching for a house, or relationship problems, or work problems, or school problems, God says, fasten yourself to me. You might be weak, but I am strong. When I was a young Christian, I used to hate it when people say to me, they'd say, Jim, Christianity's just for weak people, isn't it? And I used to be like, no, it's not for weak people, no way. Now I'm like, yeah, dead right, it's for weak people. I'm a weak person and I need God. We all do. If you want to experience God's perfect peace, if you want God to reduce your anxiety, fasten yourself to Him, bind onto Him, and He will give you strength. So, let's make this practical. I'm quickly coming to finish. 4 things that you can do this week. And if you scan the barcode below you, it'll take you through to them, okay? The PDF, I've got a sheet down here. Or if you're online, there'll be a link below you to go and check it out. It's burslem.org.uk/God. Anxiety, God and me. So burslem.org.uk, anxiety, God and me. But this is the first thing to do. This week, what you can do is, number 1, meditate on His promises. Okay? If you want to know what God thinks, what do you need to do? You need to learn what God thinks, don't you? So this week, if you're struggling with anxiety, I want to encourage you to meditate on His promises. If you're on Instagram or Facebook, there'll be a Bible verse every day that will appear on your feed. Make sure you like Burslem Elim Church, okay? Want you to meditate on that. If you haven't got it there, it's on your little link below, or it's on the sheet here at the front of church. Meditate. Spend time just meditating on His promises. Number 2, talk with a trusted friend, okay? If you are struggling, talk to somebody. Say this with me. Talk to somebody. Ready? Really easy. You know what guys do? I've met so many guys, and they don't realize that I know, like, friendship groups. And they all tell me stuff, and they say, I've just got to tell you this, pastor. And they talk to me because I'm pastor. And they think they're the only person who's going through this problem. They're not. Other people feel anxious. And the problem with anxiety leads to pain. It's shame even. And what does shame need? Shame needs silence, secrecy, and judgment. The only way to stop shame is by talking. But talk to someone trustworthy, okay? Don't talk to someone who's going to put it on Facebook, okay? There's a tip I'll give you there. Find someone to trust. Number 3, write down how you feel. If you're feeling really anxious right now, write down how you're feeling and why you're feeling it that way. And then what you do is look at what you've written and then write about your situation from God's perspective. And see what God has to say. Because I tell you what, a few people have done this exercise and it's really helped them. Finally, the last thing to do, when or where do you feel most loved by God? It might be in a church service. It might be walking in the park. It might be by yourself. It might be while you're listening to a praise worship CD or YouTube video and you're singing out top of your voice. Find that place. Spend time there. The place I most feel loved by God and I feel most content is when I'm running up a big hill, okay? For some of you, that will be hell, okay? But for me, it's heaven. Find that place. It could be a hug from someone that you love. Just make sure they want to hug you back first, okay? That would be sheer hell for me, but might be great for you. So we're all different, aren't we? But guys, anxiety, it really affects people. And it's affecting a lot more of us. And next week, we're going to look at how we help other people around us. But to start off with, if you're feeling anxious right now, God's perfect love drives out fear. The only way to be strong and overcome fear is by fastening ourselves to God.